When was the last time you drove a car that felt alive? Not fast, not quiet, alive. Like it was talking to you through the steering wheel, through the sound of the door, through the way it leaned into corners. If you cannot remember, that is because they stopped making them in 1996. The Range Rover Classic occupies a rare space in history. It sits comfortably between a piece of wound, heavy farm equipment and a royal carriage. It was the last breath of true mechanical soul before computers took over the driving experience. To understand this delicate balance, one must look at where it started. But how does a vehicle that began as a farmer's tool become the choice of royalty and celebrities? The transformation reveals something unexpected about what we value in a machine. If you appreciate preserving these mechanical stories, please take a moment to like and subscribe. The story begins in 1970. Back then, the Range Rover was a purely functional tool, not a status symbol. With vinyl seats and a plastic dashboard, you could essentially wash the floor with a hose. It was designed as a gentleman's express, capable of crossing a muddy field by day and arriving at the opera house by night. Throughout the 1980s, the vehicle slowly evolved. The makers realized that people wanted more than just utility. They wanted comfort. Carpet replaced the rubber mats, velour replaced the vinyl, then came the leather. In 1981, a major shift occurred. The introduction of the four-door body changed the character of the vehicle forever. It made the car practical for families, not just for farmers or solitary explorers. In 1987, the Range Rover officially arrived in North America. By then, the design was 17 years old. In the automotive world, that is usually a lifetime, yet this aging machine arrived and immediately set the standard. It cost around $38,000. That was roughly twice the price of a Jeep Wagoneer, which was its closest competitor, but people paid it happily. The initial buyers were not looking for flash or neon lights. They were affluent professionals who sought authenticity. They wanted something that felt real. The luxury was certainly there on the inside, but the engineering underneath remained unapologetically industrial. The appeal lay in its honesty. It did not try to hide what it was. It was a boxy, upright truck that happened to be comfortable. It had a visibility that modern cars cannot match. The pillars were thin, the glass was tall. You sat high above the traffic, not in an aggressive way, but in a commanding way. It offered a sense of calm control. While other manufacturers were chasing aerodynamics and swooping curves, the Range Rover remained steadfast. It kept its sharp corners and flat sides. It ignored the trends of the decade. This refusal to change was not laziness. It was confidence. The designers knew they had created something permanent. As the 1990s approached, this rugged foundation was finally matched with an interior worthy of the price tag. But what exactly made this boxy, tall truck ride like a luxury sedan while still climbing mountains? The answer lies in one engineering decision that changed off-road vehicles forever. To understand the soul of this machine, you must look beneath the leather. The luxury was built upon a foundation of absolute rigidity. The body sits on a traditional box-section ladder frame, the kind of construction used for heavy trucks. It gives the car a sense of mass modern unibody vehicles cannot replicate. When you drive over a pothole, the suspension absorbs the impact, but the frame remains isolated. There is no shudder. There is only a distant thud. It feels indestructible because it is. The frame explains the feeling of indestructibility. But what truly separated the Range Rover from every other 4x4 on the market was something Land Rover pioneered that even Jeep and Toyota had not figured out yet. Then there is the engine. It is the beating heart of the machine. The Rover V8 began its life as a Buick design in the 1960s. It used an aluminum block, which made it remarkably light for its size. By the time it reached the 1990s, it had been refined and enlarged. The displacement grew from the original 3.5 liters to the torque-rich 3.9-liter version found in most American models. Later, the long wheelbase models received a 4.2-liter engine. It was never about high horsepower numbers. It was about torque. It was about the ability to pull a horse trailer up a muddy incline at idle speed. The engine note is distinctive. It is a low burble that speaks of capability rather than speed. It is a sound that promises reliability. What truly separated the Range Rover from its peers was the suspension. While most four-wheel drive vehicles used crude leaf springs, the Range Rover used coil springs. Leaf springs are strong, but they ride like a cart. Coil springs allowed long wheel travel and a supple ride. The Range Rover used solid axles at both the front and the rear, the gold standard for off-road durability, allowing massive articulation. Unlike independent suspension, a solid axle keeps ground clearance constant even when the suspension compresses. Yet because of those coil springs, it rode down the highway with the smoothness of a luxury sedan. It was a revelation. It proved you did not have to suffer to be capable. The experience from the driver's seat is equally unique. Designers call it the glass house effect. The pillars that hold up the roof are incredibly thin by modern standards. The belt line is low. The windows are enormous. When you sit in the driver's seat, you can see all four corners of the vehicle. You are not buried inside a bunker of plastic and high metal walls. You are part of the environment. The visibility is absolute. It creates a feeling of safety that comes from awareness rather than isolation. You can see the traffic. You can see the scenery. You can see exactly where your tires are placed. This engineering philosophy creates a very specific driving sensation. When you turn the wheel, the body leans. There is significant body roll. Today, engineers fight to eliminate body roll with stiff suspension and electronic stabilizers. In the Classic, that lean communicates with you. It tells you exactly how much grip the tires have. It warns you when you are pushing too hard. It engages you in the process of driving. It was honest. The drivetrain remained mechanically simple for most of its life. It used a permanent four-wheel drive system that did not require buttons or levers to engage. It was always there. It was always working. The connection between the gas pedal and the engine was a physical cable. The steering was hydraulic. You felt the road through the fluid and the metal. There was no computer interpreting your inputs and deciding what was best for you. It was a direct relationship between man and machine. By the early 1990s, this rugged foundation was finally matched with an interior worthy of the price tag. The years from 1990 to 1996 would become the peak. One specific model year stands above the rest as the holy grail for collectors, and the reason why reveals exactly when the analog era ended. The final 6 years of the production run represent the absolute peak of the Classic lineage. This was the moment when the agricultural roots finally harmonized perfectly with the aristocratic aspirations. Before 1990, the vehicle was charming, but perhaps a bit crude in its execution. After 1996, the replacement models became too complex and too detached. But in this narrow window of time, everything aligned. The engineers stopped trying to reinvent the machine, and instead focused entirely on refining it. They polished the rough edges without removing the character that made it special. In 1992, a significant evolution occurred with the introduction of the long wheelbase models. Known as the County LUB in North America, this variant added 8 inches to the chassis, almost all dedicated to rear passengers. Suddenly, the vehicle became a limousine that could climb a mountain. To manage this extra size, the engineers added sway bars, and they also introduced an electronic air suspension system. This was not a gimmick. It allowed the car to kneel down to let passengers enter, then rise up to clear boulders on a trail. It smoothed out the highway ride without removing the feedback. You floated over imperfections, yet you still knew exactly what the surface beneath you was doing. But the most dramatic change in 1994 was not mechanical at all. It was something Land Rover did to the interior that made enthusiasts call these the most desirable classics ever built. The interior experienced the most dramatic transformation during this period. In 1994, the hard, angular dashboard that had defined the car for 2 decades was replaced. Enthusiasts refer to this as the soft dash era. The sharp, brutal edges were gone, replaced by padded surfaces designed for safety and comfort. The instrument cluster became clearer and more modern, yet it retained its analog clarity. The materials used here were genuine. The leather came from Connolly, the same tannery that supplied Rolls-Royce. It had a distinct smell. It was a rich, organic scent that modern synthetic materials can never duplicate. The wood was real, burled walnut. It was not a thin film of plastic printed to look like grain. It was actual timber, with depth and warmth and variation. The switches had weight to them. When you pressed a button, it engaged with a satisfying mechanical resistance. It felt substantial under your fingertips. While the V8 engine remained the star for the American market, the rest of the world received a new workhorse option. The 300 TDI diesel engine appeared during these final years. It provided legitimate torque for heavy loads and exceptional fuel range. It turned the luxury car back into a tractor when needed. This duality is key to understanding the era. You could have the finest leather seats available in the automotive world and still have an engine designed to run for 500,000 miles in the desert. This brings us to the 1995 model year. For many collectors and historians, this specific year is the holy grail. It combined the very best mechanical components with the finest interior appointments. It had the soft dash. It had the refined suspension. It had the most powerful version of the classic engine, but it still lacked the overly complicated electronics that would plague the next generation. It sat right on the precipice of the digital age without falling into it. It was the highest point of the analog curve. The technology present in these final years serves as a lesson in restraint. There were features, but there were no gimmicks. You had anti-lock brakes because they saved lives on wet pavement. You had traction control because it helped in the mud. You had heated seats because they were comfortable in the winter. But there were no screens demanding your attention. There were no submenus to navigate, just to change the radio station. Everything had a clear, distinct purpose. The technology supported the driver. It did not try to replace the human behind the wheel. It was the ultimate expression of the concept. It was not just a vehicle anymore. It had become a cultural touchstone precisely because modern sports utility vehicles fail to replicate this feeling. The Range Rover Classic achieved something few objects ever do. It bridged two completely different worlds with effortless grace. You had Queen Elizabeth driving through muddy Scottish estates, and hip-hop culture adopting it as the ultimate symbol of urban success. It was at home in a wet paddock surrounded by sheep, or parked in front of a New York City nightclub. It was the only vehicle that could pull off this dual identity without looking like it was trying too hard. It did not need aggressive styling to assert its presence. Its boxy silhouette was enough, but this massive success eventually led to a fundamental shift in perception. The automotive industry saw how much people were willing to pay for a luxury truck. They stopped viewing the Range Rover as a capable tool that happened to be luxurious. They began to see it merely as a status symbol. The focus shifted from what the vehicle could do to what the vehicle said about its owner. This marked the beginning of the end for the utilitarian soul that defined the classic. The industry realized that most buyers would never leave the pavement, so they stopped building cars for off-road driving and started building them for the shopping mall. When the second-generation model known as the P38 arrived, it was technically superior in many metrics, but something vital was missing. The sharp, confident lines were softened. The mechanical simplicity began to fade behind a wall of complex electronics prone to failure. The connection was severed. Today, the contrast is even more stark. Modern luxury sports utility vehicles are marvels of technology. They are faster and quieter, but they are also isolated. They are unibody constructions that feel like tall sedans rather than proper trucks. You sit deep inside them. You drive them with your fingertips while isolated from the world. You interact with them through glass screens that have no texture. The visibility is gone, replaced by cameras. This is why the collector market has become obsessed with the model years between 1993 and 1995. It is not just nostalgia, it is a recognition of lost quality. There is a concept in design called intentionality. The classic feels intentional in every bolt and weld. It was built with the assumption that it would be repaired and kept running for decades. Modern vehicles feel like they are designed with an expiration date. When a touchscreen fails in a modern car, the vehicle can become useless. When a switch failed in a classic, you simply replace the switch. The materials in a classic were chosen to age. The leather gets softer and develops a patina. Modern materials do not age, they simply deteriorate. Owning a Range Rover's Classic today requires a different mindset. It is not an appliance that you turn on and ignore. It requires engagement. It requires maintenance. You have to check the fluids regularly. You have to listen to the suspension work. Some might see this as a burden, but enthusiasts see it as a relationship. You have to respect its mechanical nature. In exchange, it gives you a feeling that no modern plastic box can provide. It gives you a sense of occasion every time you turn the key. It makes the act of driving feel significant again. We traded this durability and character for sterilized perfection. We gained reliability, but we lost the soul. We traded the heavy thud of a steel door for the beep of a sensor. The Range Rover Classic stands as a monument to a different time. It comes from an era when luxury meant capability rather than just technology. It reminds us that a machine can have a personality, it can have flaws and still be perfect. There is a profound difference between a machine you simply use and a machine you respect. If you appreciate the sound of a heavy door closing and the feel of true mechanical soul, please subscribe for more stories.